Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere hot. I mean really hot. You're walking through the ancient desert city of Yazd in what is now Iran, and the air feels like it's hugging your face with a dry oven-like embrace. The streets are made of sun-bleached mud brick, narrow and twisted like they're trying to hide from the sun, and just as you're sure you might melt into the cobbled ground, you pass a quiet doorway and wait. Did that breeze just kiss your cheek in the middle of this dry furnace? That little puff of chilled air isn't your imagination. It's the whisper of ancient Persian ingenuity, a kind of natural air conditioning system that's been working silently for over 1,000 years. And the truth is, you probably wouldn't last a day here without it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you down in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint upward and there it is, a tall, narrow tower, almost chimney-like, perched atop a home made of adobe and sun. It looks a bit like the top of a lighthouse, but without any light. It's open on the sides, just slots really, and from inside you hear a subtle whoosh. No fans, no wires, just air moving on its own. It's your first brush with the Bajir, the Persian wind tower. From this spot on this dry street, with the soft sand dusting your shoes, you get a sense of just how outmatched you are by the heat. But this structure, this odd tower rising like a silent sentry, it's about to change your entire idea of how humans battled the climate long before the hum of electricity ever entered the world. You step through a wooden door and into the cool shadow of a home. The contrast is immediate. It's like walking into a cellar that's been kissed by a mountain breeze. No buzzing appliances, no ice cubes clinking, just the graceful engineered miracle of airflow. The locals don't seem to notice. A shopkeeper nods lazily as he slices open a watermelon that's somehow refreshingly chilled. Children run barefoot through the shade, chasing each other beneath arched corridors that seem to breathe. Above them, all that tower keeps catching the wind like a net, pulling it down through its throat, cooling it as it passes. Here's the secret, it isn't just wind. The design is far more clever. The Badgear captures moving air from higher altitudes, where the breeze is stronger and cooler, channels it downward into the living space and often lets it skim across pools of water placed just below. The result, air that isn't just moving but cooled, moisturized, comforting. It's ancient Persian climate control, and it feels like magic. But it wasn't magic, it was architecture. Purposeful, observed, perfected through trial and time. The earliest references to these towers date back as far as 400 BCE, but Yazd is where they became art. The whole city feels designed for air. The streets are narrow not just for shade, but to funnel breezes. The rooftops are staggered and sloped to help with heat loss. The walls are thick, not just to keep you safe, but to keep your tea from boiling in its cup while it sits on a table. Historians still argue whether the wind tower originated in Persia, or was inspired by similar structures in Egypt or even the Indus Valley. But here's the thing, no one else took it quite as far. In Yazd and in dozens of smaller towns throughout the Persian plateau, Badgers became not just functional, but cultural. Some were purely practical, attached to cisterns and granaries. Others were ornate status symbols rising above merchant homes like desert crowns. You pause in the shadow of a tower and for a moment you simply breathe. The air is dry but moving, cool but natural. You lean against a clay wall still warm from the day's heat and feel that signature dessert silence pressing gently in. It's quiet but never still. The wind is always working, guided, channeled, softened. And the drinks. Oh, the drinks are never warm here. Not in the homes of the well-prepared. They're stored in earthen jars buried slightly below ground or placed strategically near the flow of cooled air. Your host hands you a small copper cup of sour cherry syrup diluted with water sherbet, it's called. It clinks slightly as you lift it, the rim cool against your lips. Not icy, but just pleasantly chilled. Like evening air in early spring. You sit on a soft woven mat, the kind that's been made by grandmothers for generations, and feel the story of this place wrap around you, not just in words, but in temperature and scent and sound. This is a city built to tame the sun, not with power, but with patience. And this is only your first step into the world of wind towers. You wake up slowly, still lying on that woven mat, unsure whether you actually slept, or just drifted somewhere softer than dreams. There's a faint rustling sound above your head, a quiet, continuous whisper. The wind. Still working. The tower looms in the courtyard like a guardian, tall and narrow, its open slots catching the breeze from whichever direction it comes. That's the trick of it. A badger isn't like a chimney with a fixed purpose. It's more like a clever animal adapting. Whichever way the wind blows, the tower is ready to guide it inward. You rise and approach it, stepping over polished stones still cool from the night. The base of the tower opens into the house like an upside-down funnel. Your host, a stooped man in a loose cotton robe, notices your curiosity. He gestures upward and then down again as if to say it breathes in the sky and exhales comfort. The cool air comes down not in a rush, but in a slow, deliberate hush. It has weight, this breeze. It doesn't slap your skin, but brushes past it with the gentle indifference of something ancient. It passes through honeycomb-like bricks designed to break the airflow just enough to spread it without force. It glides along water surfaces, soaking up coolness before gliding across the stone floors. And then it finds you. You sit beside a small water basin nestled in the heart of the home. It's nothing fancy, just a shallow pool lined with tiles glazed in turquoise, softly glimmering under the afternoon light. The wind kisses the water, carries the chill, and slides along the room like a cat that doesn't care whether you notice it. It's a simple setup, yet impossibly elegant. The tower captures the breeze. The water amplifies the effect. The architecture encourages flow. And your drink, still refreshingly cool. A sweet date infusion, this time served in a ceramic cup that smells faintly of lime and clay. You begin to notice how deliberate every element is. Vents cut at precise angles. Courtyard walls not quite symmetrical. Even the placement of the trees seems calculated for shade and scent. The fig tree on the southern side, for instance, sheds just enough filtered light onto the water to slow evaporation. These choices aren't random. They're inherited from centuries of watching the desert and learning how to live with it instead of against it. The bad gear you learn often connects not just to one room, but to many. Its channels run horizontally, two branching off to reach other courtyards, other corners of the home. Sometimes in larger houses there are 2 or even 3 wind towers, each designed to catch a different seasonal breeze. They're tall not just for pride, but for function. The higher they are, the cleaner and cooler the air they can pull down. You run your fingers along the mud brick wall, still faintly damp to the touch, another trick of the design. Some of these homes have walls treated with lime and ash to help regulate temperature and resist heat absorption. The effect is subtle, but effective. Even as the day presses toward its hottest hour, the inside of the house remains calm, not cold, just serene. You begin to wonder, how did they figure this all out? There were no thermometers, no humidity sensors, no computers simulating airflow. Historians still argue whether this knowledge came from the Zoroastrians, or perhaps from earlier wandering tribes who mapped the winds the way sailors mapped stars. Some say the idea migrated from Egypt's wind catchers known as malkaf, which used similar principles. Others claim the Persians perfected it independently, drawing inspiration from mountain breezes and underground water channels called qanats. Your host doesn't seem to care either way. He taps the side of the tower and smiles as if to say it works, doesn't it? And you have to agree. Outside, the city buzzes. Merchants shout softly behind awnings. A donkey brays lazily in the shade. But here in this room of curated breeze and singing water, you feel like you've slipped behind the curtain of history into the secret life of wind. You take another sip of your drink and lean back, letting the air do what it's always done best. No hum, no motor, just ancient design still breathing. The breeze nudges your hair as you sit cross-legged beside the shallow pool. You tilt your head and stare up again at the bagger, your curiosity now evolving into admiration. How does something so simple-looking work so flawlessly? It doesn't spin, it doesn't hum. It just exists like a desert tree that figured out how to grow upside down. And so it's time to understand it. What does a wind tower actually do? You take a slow walk beneath one of the oldest still-standing towers in Yaz, the air cool against your arms, despite the sun scorching the rooftops above. The structure looks like a tall, narrow box split with vertical slits on each side. 4, 6, even 8, depending on the building. Inside, a shaft that stretches all the way down into the house. Sometimes it's lined with wood, sometimes with angled brick. Always it's a funnel, but unlike a chimney, it's meant to bring air down. The physics are gentle but elegant. Hot air rises, cool air sinks. The desert, hot as it is, still has breezes, especially at higher altitudes. The taller the tower, the more access it has to those flowing upper drafts. And if the wind's not strong enough, the tower's interior temperature difference creates its own convection cycle. Warm indoor air escapes upward, while outside air drops in to replace it. You've just stumbled into the Persian version of an HVAC system, minus the noise, minus the bills, and let's be honest, way more poetic. A teenage boy guides you to the base of one tower still attached to an old merchant's home. He grins and pulls open a wooden hatch you didn't notice before. Below it, a small passage filled with polished stones and a splash of water. The wind passes through, kissing the surface of the liquid. By the time it reaches the living room, the once fiery breeze has mellowed into a sleepy sigh. Some towers go further. In larger homes and public bathhouses, the towers are connected directly to qanats, those underground water channels that snake beneath the city. The airflow is drawn not just across a surface pool, but sometimes over entire corridors of moving water, creating a kind of subterranean wind tunnel that cools entire wings of a structure. You pause to imagine it. A wind from the sky travelling underground to greet water from a distant mountain, snowmelt all so someone can sip rosewater tea without sweating through their robe. Your guide hands you a folded sketch, one of the simplified diagrams schoolchildren here draw, to explain the tower. You smile. It's beautifully basic: an arrow for wind, a rectangle for the shaft, a small blue square for water. But even with stick figures and sun scribbles, the elegance shines through. Still not everyone agrees on the exact method. Historians still argue whether the true cooling came from convection, warm air rising out the top, or from active wind capture. Others point to pressure differentials between openings, or suggest the walls of the tower themselves played a bigger role by remaining perpetually cool and drawing heat away from the airflow. One fringe theory even suggests some badgers acted as evaporative coolers when wind passed through wet reeds, or cloths placed in the shaft, moisture evaporated and absorbed heat, dropping the temperature as much as 10 degrees C. That's not just refreshing, that's survival. You return to your seat beside the water basin and try to feel the difference. The air here is noticeably softer, less arid. Not quite humid, but certainly not the desiccating blast you felt on the open street. You close your eyes and imagine being an architect in 10th century Persia. No CAD software, no models, no equations, just wind water, clay and wisdom. And still you'd pull it off. What strikes you most is how intuitive it all feels. Unlike modern tech, there are no instruction manuals, no troubleshooting codes. The wind tower isn't a machine, it's an agreement. You shape the tower, and the wind agrees to help. You place the water, and the heat agrees to behave. You sip something new this time, mint and cucumber infused water, cooled by a clay pot that sat near the airflow. It tastes like the colour green in the best way. The air continues its slow descent through the shaft, tracing ancient lines in the stone and whispering the same lullabies it did 1,000 years ago. And with every breath you understand that this wasn't just about comfort. This was a philosophy. A culture choosing harmony with its environment rather than brute force. You lean back against the wall, head tilted upward, letting the soft hush of the wind tower lull you further into the architecture's secret. Not every miracle is loud. Some just sigh through a crack in the wall and offer you a cooler drink. The wind nudges you onward, and so you follow it through a labyrinth of narrow sunshine alleys carved in baked mud and time. You begin to realise something peculiar. This entire city seems to breathe. Every turn you take in Yazd feels deliberate. The streets twist and fold like origami, not out of confusion but design. You pause at a bend so tight you could nearly touch both walls with outstretched arms. Above you, clay domes and vaulted archways create shadow tunnels that stretch and narrow, forcing the air to rush through them like whispers trapped in a flute. This is no accident. Yazd wasn't built against the wind, it was built with it. The ancient city's very layout, called kuches, these twisting alleys functions like a grand wind funnel. By narrowing the pathways and angling them, just so the entire neighbourhood works in concert to catch the evening breeze and guide it home. You walk slowly now, letting your fingers trail along walls warm from the day but no longer scorching. You pass a small bakery where flatbread cools beside a tiny window, cut to the west, not for light but for air. Even the windows are placed not for view, but for ventilation. You catch the scent of cardamom and smoke, and a fresh puff of breeze follows behind you like a pet dog learning the route. Above you, wine towers dot the skyline like gentle chimneys. Some are narrow and plain. Others are tall, wide, and carved with delicate lattice work that filters sunlight while guiding the breeze. A few lean slightly off-centre, intentional, you're told later, to catch seasonal shifts in wind direction more efficiently. Nature isn't always straight, and neither are buildings that respect her. You step into a shaded courtyard and glance around. No room here opens directly into the sun. Every door faces a cooler pocket. Every tree, mulberry, fig or pomegranate is placed where it shades the floor or nearby wall during peak heat. The inner geometry of the home is centered around water, a pool or fountain always. You dip your fingers in one as the breeze glides across it, and suddenly the temperature around you seems to dip a few subtle but crucial degrees. This breeze isn't strong, it's not the kind of gust that flutters clothes or turns heads. It's intentional. It's a careful draft designed not to dazzle but to soothe. It trickles in like a promise kept to sigh between bricks, something more felt than seen. And here's the kicker, even without a wind tower, Persian homes used clever design to stay cool. Domed ceilings helped hot air rise and stay away from living spaces. Thick walls, sometimes more than a metre deep, acted as thermal batteries absorbing heat by day and releasing it slowly at night. Floors were often sunken just below street level, allowing cool earth to cradle them in natural insulation. In this context, the badger was the crown jewel, a natural amplifier for a system already ahead of its time. Historians still argue whether wind towers were more about luxury than necessity. Some suggest that only the wealthy had the height or materials to build them. Others point to rural versions, small modest towers built from reeds and mud that achieved the same effect on a smaller scale. What's clear though is that wind-aware architecture wasn't a privilege here, it was a mindset. You imagine a young apprentice architect in the 11th century following his master through the streets with a reed scroll under one arm. He doesn't ask where to build the tower. He asks why the tower faces east in this alley, but north in that one. He asks how the fig tree's placement affects the morning chill. And most importantly, he listens to wind, to silence, to the soft complaints of stones that cracked under too much sun. By now your clothes feel cooler. The air around you has slowed. You sit on a shaded bench near a public cistern, ab anbar they call it, and watch two cats doze in its shadow. You realise that you've stopped sweating. Not because the temperature dropped dramatically, but because the air moved just enough just where it needed to. Someone hands you a drink wrapped in a wet cloth, a simple local trick. The wind rushing over the damp fabric cools it further by evaporation. You sip slowly. Rosewater and honey and wind. You lean your head back against the mud brick and let your eyes drift shut. The city exhales again gently and without end. This isn't just a place. It's an ecosystem of silence, clay and breeze. A design you can live inside. A wisdom you don't need to translate. The wind tower hums overhead. And for a moment you forget the desert entirely. You decide it's time to go higher. The tower above you, your quiet host for the last few hours, beckons with its slatted openings and weather-worn grace. You run your palm along its base, feeling the cool stone tinged with centuries of wind. Your guide, now amused at your lingering fascination, leads you to a narrow stairwell at the back of the house. It's more of a spiral chute than a staircase. The walls close in tightly, the ceiling slopes awkwardly, and each step is just a bit too steep. It's not made for tourists or admiration, it's made for maintenance. For people who lived with this system, not just visited it. As you climb, the air shifts. First warmer, then thinner. Then as you near the top, cooler. Your fingers graze the side wall and feel it again, airflow. Not fierce, but steady. A constant, soothing push of air drawn down through channels you still can't quite see. The stairwell opens into a small loft-like chamber, dusty and dim. And then finally you step into the belly of the badger. From up here it's suddenly alive. Light filters through the slits in the tower. Each open face is angled toward a different horizon. You poke your head slightly out one side and nearly gasp. The wind pushes into your face with a dry softness like a silk ribbon pulled taut. You can see how the structure does its work. The tall hollow shaft beneath you, open at the top, stretches all the way down to the rooms below. The design is simple. Air comes in, drops down, and takes the heat with it. What rises back up is tired, warm air that drifts out through the opposite opening, starting the cycle anew. It's not symmetrical, not evenly split, and that's intentional. The wind doesn't behave symmetrically, neither does heat, and neither does good architecture. You glance down the shaft, and for a moment your mind does a little somersault, like peering into a canyon of mud brick and echo. A small pulley system is still visible on one side. In older times, cloths soaked in water were sometimes hoisted into the shaft to enhance cooling through evaporation. You imagine the caretaker in some long-ago century climbing up here each morning to adjust the fabrics depending on the wind's mood. A few pigeons flutter along the outer ledges, one perches beside a carved brick motif, a flower maybe, or a sunburst weathered into abstraction. You realise the tower isn't just functional, it's beautiful. Not decorated despite its use, but because of it. Every design choice serves both the eye and the wind. You crouch near a corner, careful not to bump anything loose, and just listen. There's a hum. Not mechanical, not artificial. Just a pure airy hush like a stream running sideways. The air shifts depending on where you place your body. It curls around your ankles, it brushes your ears, it slides across your shoulders like it knows you're there. Historians still debate whether these towers were consciously engineered or simply evolved from necessity. Did some genius sketch the idea in a desert notebook? Or did it start humbly an open slit in a roof that someone noticed made the room a bit more bearable and then improved generation by generation? Some scholars believe early badgers were inspired by termite mounds, those natural architects of airflow found in Africa and Asia. Others argue the inspiration was entirely human trial, error, sweat and perseverance. Either way, what you're sitting in now isn't just a cooling device, it's the sum total of centuries of listening to nature, letting form follow breath. You lie on your back on a wooden beam after brushing it off, you're not that brave, and stare up at the sky framed by the tower's highest mouth. A slice of blue, a smudge of cloud, a hint of bird, and then soft laughter below. Your host is calling you down. There's another drink waiting, and maybe something sweet. You descend slowly, the stairwell now familiar, the tower's interior no longer mysterious. The breeze follows you down like a companion nudging you along, reminding you it's always been there. By the time you step back into the shaded courtyard, the drink is already waiting. Tamarind and rose, cool and floral. The kind of refreshment that feels like a nap in a cup. You take a long sip exhale and glance back at the badger. It stands motionless, unbothered by admiration. And yet you can't help but smile. That tower made of clay and silence just showed you what human beings can build when they let the world teach them. You sit down again by the pool, the same quiet basin you've now circled more times than you care to count. It's shallow, barely ankle deep, tiled with blue-green glaze that catches sunlight in lazy swirls. The breeze drifts across it like fingers on a harp, and the air that reaches your face is noticeably cooler, even scented faintly with water and limestone. Your host sees your interest and gestures for you to follow. He leads you a few steps into a shaded room that opens partially underground. A flight of 5 or 6 broad steps descends into a dim chamber, cooler, quieter. The walls are smooth plaster, and your sandals echo faintly on the stone. This, he tells you with a gentle nod, is where the magic happens. At the base of the wind tower, directly below the tall shaft you explored earlier, lies a sardab, a basement chamber designed to hold the air that has journeyed down through the Bagir. It's not meant for storage, it's meant for existence, for living, for sipping, for cooling. You stand in the centre of the room. No sound, no creaking, no buzzing, no hum of machines. Just that slow breath of wind as it enters, glides over the flagstone floor, and disappears into a second vent low on the opposite wall. That's another exit, a passive escape, that ensures the air doesn't stagnate, completing a gentle, continuous flow. At the centre of the sardab is a water basin deeper than the ones above. This one's been dug directly into the earth, its base packed with crushed granite and clay to hold moisture. The air that comes down the tower first kisses this surface, gathering a faint layer of moisture and temperature before slipping into the rest of the home. It's more than effective, it's art. You kneel beside the pool and your fingers trace lazy circles through the water. A few flower petals float near the edge, orange marigold, a pale rose, something that smells faintly of citrus. You lift your hand to your face, and the air touching your wet skin feels startlingly fresh. Not refrigerator cold, not synthetic, but gentle, earthy like a spring cave after rainfall. Your host hands you a small clay cup filled with second jabin, a sweet and sour Persian drink made from vinegar and mint syrup. It's not icy, but it's perfectly cool, kept in a jug that sat in the sardab's corner all day under the breeze's careful watch. You sip, and the flavours pull your eyebrows up with surprise tart herbal, sweet and utterly refreshing. You ask why water, why always water beneath the tower. He shrugs as if to say why not, but the real reason you know is physics. Moving air over water absorbs heat, it gains moisture, it shifts its mood. What would be a dry breeze in the upper levels becomes something almost nurturing as it passes across the liquid. It's the original swamp cooler minus the noise and the plastic. Historians still debate how intentional this part of the design was. Did ancient builders know they were crafting a cooling system based on convection and evaporation? Or was it a happy accident that the homes with central pools and open vents just felt better and the practice stuck? Some argue it was ritual before it was science. Others insist it was always practical. After all, water was precious in the desert. Why not make it work double shifts? Either way, the result is the same. You sit in a room where the sun hasn't touched the walls in hours, and yet you're comfortable. More than that, you feel embraced. Like the building is holding your body in balance with the air outside, the ground below, and the sky above. Your host, sensing your wonder, gently taps the side wall. A small niche is carved into the plaster. It once held a lantern, but today it holds a bundle of dried herbs, lavender, spearmint rose. When the wind flows past it, the scent fills the room. A medieval air freshener, you realise, and a clever one at that. There's a philosophical calm in this space, a design philosophy rooted not in dominance over nature but in understanding it, listening to it, letting it guide the hand. And maybe that's what modern architecture so often forgets. These ancient homes weren't built to show off. They were built to coexist. You close your eyes and let the scent, the breeze and the silence do their work. This isn't just a basement. It's a sanctuary of elements in balance. Earth, water, air all tuned for comfort, all singing the same low, breathy song. And still above you the tower hums. You climb slowly out of the sardab, blinking as your eyes adjust to the brighter courtyard light. The wind tower still stands above, unchanged, silent, unmoving, and yet somehow, always doing something, always working. You take a seat on a smooth stone bench in the shade, and a new question floats into your mind, light as the breeze itself. Where did all this knowledge come from? It's easy to assume someone somewhere simply had a brilliant idea. But as you sip your drink now, a warm blend of pomegranate and basil, chilled just enough to be perfect, you realise there's likely no single inventor. No ancient Persian Thomas Edison of airflow. Instead, this was an accumulation, a slow gathering of observation, mistake and memory, a kind of inheritance passed not through books, but through bricks. Historians still argue whether the first true wind towers came from Persia or were borrowed and refined. Some point to Egypt, where Malkaf wind catchers were used as early as 1300 BCE. Others cite Mesopotamian homes with narrow vents that may have served similar purposes. And then there are the Indus Valley sites, Mohenjo-Daro, especially where certain architectural features hint at early temperature control. But none seem to have perfected the art quite like the Persians did. What's clear is that Persia became the centre of this quiet revolution in desert engineering. And why wouldn't it? The land demanded it. Summers regularly surged above 40° 104°, and the only materials available were mud, straw, lime and water if you could find it. So they watched the wind, they felt the sun, and they began to design buildings that responded to the environment like lungs and skin rather than walls and roofs. You recall the winding alleys of Yazd, how they always seemed to turn into the breeze. You remember the tall, thick walls of homes, how they leaned slightly to cast longer shadows. These weren't stylistic choices. They were environmental decisions. The people here didn't wait for answers from books. They paid attention to the behaviour of goats to where the cat slept during the day. They noticed which rooms stayed warm at night, which floors cooled fastest after dusk. They didn't call it science, but it was observational science conducted barefoot and with calloused hands. In time, these observations turned into practices. Homes were oriented based on prevailing winds. Courtyards were designed to trap cool night air. Even colour choices mattered. Pale earth tones on exteriors reflected heat, while dark tiles lining water basins helped retain coolness longer. You learn that many Persian homes were designed with multiple wind towers, each one facing a different direction. During seasonal changes, they'd be opened or blocked accordingly. One for the spring breezes, one for the dry summer gusts, one for the rare but welcome winter winds. This wasn't a gadget. It was a system, a whole architectural language that spoke softly to the environment and actually listened for the reply. You're told stories of master builders, mimars as they were known, who would spend days simply watching the wind move through a property before deciding where to place the tower. No blueprints, just intuition refined over generations. One tale tells of a builder who placed his palm on every wall at dawn to find the one that sang coldest, before deciding which way the bad gear should face. And maybe that's why these towers last. They weren't built quickly. They weren't built for trend. They were built from care, that rare ingredient that no cement mixer can ever match. You sip your drink again. The mint rises through your sinuses and lingers there like a polite guest. The air shifts and you suddenly notice how it's always in motion even when it's still. Maybe that's the real secret. The tower doesn't make the wind, it meets it halfway. Just like the people who built them. They didn't conquer the desert. They conversed with it. The conversation still echoes through these walls. The late afternoon light starts to melt into a softer gold as you wander through another part of the neighbourhood. This time, you're following the path of a can at an underground water channel that's even older than the Badgirs and somehow more mysterious. Your guide leads you to a small square building that looks like an oversized well house. A stone lip circles a central shaft that plunges into darkness, and from within, you hear something unbelievable in this sun-scorched landscape trickling water. This is where cool begins. The Qanat system is one of ancient Persia's most ingenious creations, an invisible river engineered by men with nothing more than hand tools, geometry, and sheer stubbornness. You lean over the edge and feel a draft of moist, chilled air brush your face. It's as if the earth itself has just sighed in relief. Your host explains that these channels tap into mountain aquifers sometimes more than 40 kilometers away. Dug at a gentle slope, the water flows silently beneath the surface, avoiding evaporation guided by gravity alone. It's a miracle of precision. One wrong angle and the entire system fails, and yet they built thousands of them. Here's where the story ties itself together. Some of the most advanced Badgers were connected directly to Qanats. The wind entering the tower didn't just pass over a still pool, it dove into these shadow tunnels, swept along the underground stream, and emerged into homes not just cooler, but calmer. You're guided down a narrow staircase carved into the earth, your footsteps echo softly against lime-coated walls. The temperature drops with each step. The air thickens slightly with moisture. And then you see at the canal. It runs narrow and quiet, hugging the wall like a silver ribbon stitched through stone. The sound is hypnotic. You sit on a low bench carved into the chamber wall and let the breeze waft through. Here the Badger becomes part of a larger, quieter machine. The tower above acts like a chimney drawing air down through the shaft, where it scoops along the Qanat and brings it into the room, like a secret delivery of spring. You can almost feel the temperature shift as it moves past your ankles, rippling across the floor up your spine and across the surface of your cup. Some historians call this the world's first passive cooling system. Others go even further, arguing that the combination of Qanat and Badgir represents a lost high point of sustainable design, low-resource, self-operating, zero-emission architecture that worked seamlessly with the harshest climate on Earth. But there's still debate. Some believe the wind tower's connection to the Qanat wasn't intentional at first, that it was an accidental synergy. Someone placed the shaft above a tunnel, noticed the result, and it became tradition. Others point to architectural texts that describe the pairing in vivid, purposeful detail. You take off your sandals and press your feet against the cool stone. It's not just a relief, it feels earned, like the earth is rewarding you for descending into its belly with quiet footsteps and an open mind. Your host lights a tiny oil lamp set into a wall niche. The flicker dances across the surface of the water, catching the shimmer of moving air and turning it briefly visible. You watch the light bend and twist in the draft, and for a moment the air seems alive. You imagine what it must have felt like 1,000 years ago on a summer afternoon just like this. The family gathered in the sardab, a jug of sharbat cooling by the canal, the mother stirring dates into yogurt, the grandfather nodding off with a palm fan forgotten in his lap. No electricity, no hum, no distraction, just waterclay and wind, all choreographed to keep the body calm and the mind light. You dip your fingers in the Qanat water. It's colder than you'd expect, crisp and clean. It reminds you that cooling in this ancient world wasn't about beating the heat. It was about flowing with it, finding the rhythm of the environment and moving just slightly out of step. You rise slowly, following the sound of your own breath back up the staircase. When you step once more into daylight, the air doesn't feel quite so oppressive. The wind tower hums gently overhead, the ground below still breathing cool, and somewhere in the space between them, balanced perfectly, is you. You walk through Yazd as twilight begins to settle across the rooftops. The sun hasn't disappeared yet, it's clinging to the horizon, like the last ember of a campfire, but the air has begun its nightly ritual. It's shifting, relaxing, loosening its grip. The harsh heat of the day is retreating, and a new breeze stirs through the alleys like a careful hand pulling back a bedsheet. You stop beside a home with an especially tall Badger, its silhouette stark against the dimming sky. The tower catches the changing wind with visible purpose. It's as if it's waited all day for this, the golden hour when temperatures drop, and the cooling system can truly exhale. You step into the home and immediately feel the shift. Inside, the air is not just cool, it's refreshing. Alive. There's a current to it now, stronger than before. You walk toward the centre of the house, where a courtyard opens above like a small stage under the darkening heavens. A fig tree stands at its centre, its leaves trembling gently with the movement of air. In one corner of the courtyard, a small basin shimmers. You sit beside it and feel the flow. This is one of the best parts of the system, the daily rhythm it follows. During the hottest part of the day, the air flows downward into the house, offering cooling relief. But in the evening, as the outdoor temperature drops below the temperature inside, the flow reverses. Warm air escapes up through the tower, and cool night air drifts in through lower vents. It's a breathing structure. You realise that you're not sitting inside a building, you're sitting inside a cycle. A carefully orchestrated play between pressure and temperature, between architecture and atmosphere. It's alive in the way coral reefs are alive, formed slowly layer by layer by tiny acts of brilliance that add up to something stunning. As the air moves past your skin, you notice another detail, the scent. There's always scent in desert air when the temperature changes. You pick up notes of claywood smoke, a hint of rosewater, maybe even the citrus peel someone discarded hours ago. All of it moving gently through the corridors, whispering past thresholds and corners. The wind tower doesn't just cool, it carries memories, fragrances, life. Historians still debate whether these towers functioned identically across seasons. Some argue that in winter, the same architecture served as a passive heater, trapping warmth inside by blocking off airflow entirely. Others believe the winter air simply didn't need such orchestration, and people lived closer to the kitchen or central hearth instead. Either way, the wind tower was adaptable, seasonal, a structure that responded rather than demanded. As you sit there, the stars blink slowly into view. The sky has faded to a dusky cobalt, and the silhouettes of more badgers line the skyline like sentinels. You imagine them all working together across the city, each one part of a greater whole. An invisible symphony of air flowing through rooms and halls and courtyards, soothing people to sleep. Your host returns with a tray. A final evening drink, golab or rosewater tea, served barely warm, just enough to bloom the fragrance. You sip slowly, the floral notes drifting upward with the air that now spirals gently out of the house. And that's the curious beauty of it. You're not sure if the wind tower is still cooling or gently heating now. But it doesn't matter. It's regulating, calming, balancing. And in that balance you find comfort. You lie back on a woven mat and stare upward. Through the square opening of the courtyard you can see the base of the wind tower framed by stars. It's not loud. It doesn't glow. It doesn't advertise its brilliance. It simply is. And as the warm air leaves the house through that quiet ancient shaft, and the cool air brushes over your skin one more time, you finally understand why the people who lived here didn't just survive the desert. They thrived in it. The morning comes early in Yazd and you wake not to the sound of alarms or traffic, but to silence gently unravelling. The city feels like it's still exhaling from the night before. You sit up slowly and notice something curious. Your body isn't sticky with heat. Your throat isn't parched. Somehow, despite the desert, you've slept comfortably. You stretch beneath the tall, slatted face of the wind tower that guarded your sleep all night. It's still doing its work. Even as the sun peeks cautiously over the rooftops, the air inside the house remains cool. You realise the badger hasn't stopped working. It's simply shifted gears. During the night, it vented warmth from the house. Now as the air outside begins to warm, it will reverse its pull, drawing the last remnants of night air into your space. Your host appears again, offering you a chilled breakfast platter. Wedges of cold melon yogurt with crushed pistachio, a smear of date paste on flatbread, and a small copper pot of honey tea that's just cool enough to be pleasant. It's not a feast. It's a ritual one aligned perfectly with the architecture around it. You eat slowly beneath the soft hum of the air flowing past. You notice that the cup of tea left sitting in the corner for a moment doesn't warm up as quickly as it would in your kitchen back home. That's not a trick of time, it's a triumph of structure. The air circulating through the house carries away warmth before it can linger. Every wall, every vent, every square of tile exists not just to stand, but to participate. You wander into a side room after breakfast, a narrow chamber lined with shelves and stone ledges. Here you find small clay jars of preserved herbs, a few old copper bowls, and a small chest filled with clothes folded like time capsules. This room is slightly cooler than the others. It's a pantry, or perhaps more accurately a storage refrigerator powered entirely by airflow. This use of the badger wasn't just for living spaces. It extended to kitchens, storerooms, and even granaries. Wind towers were sometimes attached to larger commercial buildings, caravanserais, where travellers rested, or bazaar stalls where spices and fruits were stored. Some versions even had separate shafts for intake and exhaust to maximise control. You open a small wooden door set low on the wall and peek into a hollow chamber lined with ceramic pots. A local trick pot's partially buried in cool sand with the wind tower's airflow passing over them. The effect passive refrigeration. In the right conditions, food could last days longer. Yogurt stayed thick. Sherbet stayed tart. Even meat salted and sealed held out longer than it had any right to in the desert. Historians still puzzle over how much of this was by design versus discovered through use. Some argue the wind tower's culinary benefits were only realised centuries after their architectural debut. Others believe the original Mimas the master builders were keenly aware of the full potential. After all, when water and shade are scarce, even the simplest breeze is sacred. You step out into the courtyard again and glance upward. The tower is catching less wind now, it's not as aggressive. The sun is climbing, the air is still. But the interior of the house is holding strong. Thick walls made from keshed mud bricks, sun-dried, not fired, insulate the space with surprising effectiveness. A quick tap on the wall confirms it, the surface is warm but not hot. Behind it, the mass of clay holds a reserve of coolness, like a sleeping camel holds water. You pause at the water basin and dip your hand again. Still cool, still flowing. The wind tower, even in partial rest, is enough to keep the room balanced. And in the stillness, you feel something else: gratitude. Not just yours, but built into the bones of the place. Gratitude for the wind, for water, for shade. This isn't just shelter, it's symbiosis. You take a final bite of melon. It's so cold you blink from surprise. Chilled not with ice, not with gadgets, but with geometry time and quiet intentional craft. And then you breathe it in the scent of basil again. The hush of the courtyard, the faint shift of the wind. This isn't just a home, it's a poem made of air. You head out again, this time toward a part of the old city rarely shown in guidebooks, the outskirts where the badgers rise like sails on a silent sea. They don't glisten, they don't shout. But they hold their place against the skyline with the kind of dignity that only comes from purpose. The homes here are older, more weather-worn. Their courtyards are a bit uneven, their wind towers patched here and there with generations of repairs. But the towers still breathe. They still hum. You hear the faint sigh of one as you pass beneath it, and it feels less like a machine and more like a living part of the house, a lung that's never stopped exhaling. You stop by one of the larger structures in the neighbourhood, a domed public building flanked by twin towers, each over 10 metres tall. It's a yakchal, an ancient ice house. The name means ice pit, and once you step inside you understand why. The interior is cavernous and quiet. The dome arches high overhead, made of thick mud brick walls lined with insulating straw and ash. At the centre lies a deep pit, now dry but still cool. Long ago this is where ice was stored throughout the blazing Persian summers. But how you walk further in your feet, crunching softly on crushed gravel, and you feel the temperature drop with every step. These structures, some dating back over 2,000 years, were part of an advanced system that used evaporation insulation and nighttime ice making to preserve winter's chill deep into July. Outside the dome, long shallow pools, freezing basins were constructed. During cold winter nights, water would be poured into them and allowed to freeze. The ice was then broken up before dawn and hauled into the yakchal layered with straw and insulated from the encroaching heat. And here's where it connects again. Wind towers were sometimes used to help vent the space. As warm air rose out of the dome, it was replaced by cooler air channeled in from the shaded earth or from underground qanat flows nearby. You lean against the curved interior wall and close your eyes. The place smells faintly of old clay, maybe salt, maybe lime. You imagine workers in the dead of night hauling blocks of ice with bare hands, their breath visible in the frigid air. You imagine the city's wealthier homes receiving ice deliveries from here, small chipped pieces stored in clay urns used to chill sharbat or medicine, or simply to soothe a heat-weary guest. Historians still argue how widespread the practice was. Some claim only the wealthy had access to yakchal stored ice, while others argue these domes were often community-oriented, used for food preservation, water cooling, and even cooling the bodies of the deceased before burial. There's a kind of quiet nobility to the design, a willingness to work with nature's extremes instead of trying to bulldoze through them. At night, these basins froze without electricity. By day, the ice was kept without refrigeration. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't instant, but it was sustainable, logical, local. You climb a narrow path along the side of the yakchal and peek through a small opening near the top of the dome. The desert spreads before you, still wide and blinding, but the air here at the top is surprisingly calm. A faint current lifts toward your face and drifts upward, rising from the cooler chamber below. That's the secret warm air always wants to leave. You just have to give it a good exit. And that's what the wind towers have always done. Given heat a dignified way out. You sit atop the dome for a while, legs folded, face turned into the breeze. You think about everything you've seen, the sardabs, the kennets, the towers, the city itself, and it all begins to feel like one extended breath. A civilization that didn't conquer its climate but danced with it. A people who through trial and tradition learned to listen to wind and stone and shade, who made refreshment from what others would call emptiness. You exhale, the desert listens. By midday the city begins to shimmer. The heat rolls in like a slow tide rising from the streets, warping the air, settling in folds of shadow like a thick invisible curtain. You can barely touch the stone walls now. Even the pigeons have retreated to the undersides of awnings, blinking lazily at the sunlight they once welcomed. But you're cool, because you're stepping into the shaded retreat of a merchant's home, one that once belonged to a spice trader, and still smells faintly of saffron, sun-dried fig and distant lands. You feel it the moment you cross the threshold of transition. It's as if you've ducked beneath the edge of a wave and entered another current entirely. The wind tower above isn't visible from inside. It doesn't announce itself. But you can feel it air moving down gently from somewhere, coiling around columns, pooling along the cool tile floor. The room is long and rectangular with high ceilings and a sunken centre where cushions and low tables are arranged. Your feet instinctively gravitate there because it's at least 5 degrees cooler. The house is designed for the heat, every part of it. Thick walls trap the previous night's coolness. Small high-set windows let in light but block direct sun. The floors are made of stone set over compacted earth, which acts like a sponge, slowly releasing chill as the day progresses. And here in the very centre, the wind tower's delivery arrives like a silent waiter, refreshing your senses without saying a word. You lie back on a floor cushion, and your host gestures to a servant who brings a tray of iced rosewater and lime. The glass is sweating, but not from a freezer. It's the result of simple slow cooling. The drink was stored in a zir, a clay jug kept close to the airflow path. Its porous sides allow water to evaporate slowly, which in turn cools the contents. The same principle as the badgear just bottled, this synergy between architecture and lifestyle is no accident. In hot cities like Yazd, daily routines had to align with the rhythm of cooling. People worked in the mornings and evenings. Afternoons were for rest, storytelling and shade. Meals were light, often cold and always hydrating. And the homes were built not just as protection from heat, but as partners in the dance with it. Historians still debate the full extent to which these homes operated as cooling machines. Were they truly effective in all conditions? Did their designs change with dynasties, materials or regional customs? Some suggest certain wind towers were seasonal, blocked off entirely during the cold months. Others argue that different heights, angles and opening shapes were adapted based on the gender of the home's primary occupants, a blend of ventilation and cultural privacy. But all agree on this: these spaces worked. Without wires, without refrigerant, just by listening to the land. You sip your drink and listen to the soft gurgle of a small wall fountain, a modest one fed from a nearby kanat and placed strategically in the airflow's path. The sound alone seems to cool the room, and the air carries its faint mist with each lazy swirl. The merchant's home is also built to circulate not just air, but life. The wind tower's shaft leads not only into this central chamber, but also off into narrower rooms, storage spaces, bedrooms, even the kitchen. Each one receives a thread of the breeze like notes from the same instrument played softly behind a veil. You wander through them slowly. In one room, silk bolts are still stacked in a niche perfumed with cedar chips. In another, a tiny carved window lets a single shaft of light fall directly across a painted tile mosaic of a peacock. But no matter where you step, the air is moving, sometimes barely perceptible, but always in motion, always tuned. You pause in a side room where a child's sleeping mat is laid on a low platform directly beneath a wooden vent. It's angled, you notice, not for a view, but to catch the coolest possible draft from the badger's funnel. You sit cross-legged beside it and imagine being a child here, wrapped in linen, the air brushing your skin like a lullaby. You think of parents placing their baby's crib in the most precisely calculated airflow spot, not using apps or thermometers, but instinct and trust. And that's what it comes down to, isn't it? Trust in the wind, in clay, in water, in time. You close your eyes and the room fades around you, not into silence, but into breath. The home exhales once more and you follow the wind deeper into rest. Later that afternoon you're invited to the rooftop. It's flat like most roofs here, with low parapet walls and a scattering of faded cushions that look like they've known many evenings and many cups of tea. From up here the view is quiet. Domes, minarets and the ever-familiar wind towers, dozens of them. Some tall and proud, some hunched like old men, but all still standing, still breathing. Your host points to a squat little tower near the edge of the roof. It's no more than a metre tall, barely enough to clear the parapet. He taps it with his foot and raises an eyebrow. For the water, he says. This one doesn't cool people directly. It cools storage pots of grain, jugs of molasses, baskets of dried fruit, all kept in a tiny room below that catches a sliver of the airflow, and it hits you. The wind towers aren't just for luxury. They were for food, for medicine, for function. You walk over and peek down into the small shaft. It's angled steeply, more like a chute than the broad vertical shafts in homes. The opening is narrower, and the breeze that escapes is subtle like a secret you weren't supposed to hear. This tower doesn't shout. It whispers coolness. You descend a narrow stairwell into the connected storage room lower than ground level, and just wide enough to turn around in. The air is somehow still comfortable. Jars of pickled garlic line the wall. Dried herbs hang from a ceiling beam. The wind passes over everything like a careful chef ensuring balance. You ask if this method kept food from spoiling. Your host shrugs, then grins. Didn't stop us from eating it. Historians still argue how effective these mini-cooling towers were in preserving perishable goods. Some say the airflow reduced humidity just enough to extend shelf life. Others believe the effect was more psychological, keeping cooks cooler, which made kitchens more bearable and felt like food lasted longer. Either way, the method endured. You climb back to the roof, the sun now shifting from harsh to golden. It paints the skyline in soft light, and the badgers' once rigid silhouettes start to glow. You're offered a plate of falud, a semi-frozen Persian dessert made from rice noodles, rosewater and lime. It's slightly melting, but still cool, kept in a shaded nook all day, with air passing over it. You take a bite. The contrast is exquisite. The air is warm, the dessert is cold, and the city just holds still, long enough for you to notice how everything here is balanced like that heat and cold stone and sky stillness and breath. You sit on the edge of the roof with your knees drawn up and the plate resting between them. From here you can see the network, the alleys channeling air like streams, the domes deflecting heat, the towers catching breezes like fishermen casting invisible nets. It wasn't a single system. It was many overlapping, adapted, quietly brilliant. A layered response to an unforgiving climate that never once tried to overpower it. And that's the part that feels most humbling. Because in a world that now builds towering skyscrapers of glass and metal, that cools entire cities with megawatts of machinery, these people cooled their food with geometry. They drank chilled syrup thanks to wind. They built homes not for domination, but for conversation with the air. You look again at the tiny tower, the one cooling a jar of pomegranate molasses beneath your feet, and feel a little ashamed of your electric refrigerator back home, and also a little grateful. The wind shifts. You hear it hum in a dozen towers across the skyline. It sounds like old wisdom, like a city breathing in harmony with its own body. You take another bite of Faluda, now half melted, and let the rosewater flavour drift across your tongue. You don't need a fan. You've got the wind. As dusk settles in, your host invites you on one last errand, a visit to the ice harvesters. Yes, ice, in the desert. You raise an eyebrow naturally. The sun just baked the streets all afternoon, and the only ice you've encountered so far was a faint memory inside your melon breakfast. But your host just grins and leads the way, sandals flapping softly against the cool stone, as you pass through archways tinged orange by the fading light. You soon arrive at an open field on the edge of the city. It's oddly geometric, lined with shallow rectangular pools carved into the ground, each no more than a few inches deep. The surface of the water glistens perfectly still, reflecting the first stars appearing overhead. It looks like a ceremonial site, something mystical, but this is pure utility. This, your host says, is where we make winter. These are ice-making pools used during the coldest nights of the year to produce blocks of ice outdoors without machines. Here's how it worked in winter. The shallow depth of the pools allowed water to freeze quickly after sunset. The wider the surface area and the lower the volume, the faster it gave up its heat to the night sky. At dawn, workers would gather before the sun rose, break the newly formed ice and haul it into yakchals, those domed ice houses you explored earlier. Layered with straw and packed into pits, the ice could last for months. But here's the twist, some of those ice houses had ventilation towers, miniature badgers attached. As warm air rose through the dome, it drew cooler air in from the base, helping preserve the icy treasure. Even in summer, even under a punishing sun. Historians still debate how effective this method really was. Could they really store ice into July? Some claim yes, citing travel journals and poetry that mention summer sherbets served with shaved ice. Others suggest the yakchals were more symbolic than practical by the time later dynasties took over useful for food, yes, but not miracle workers. Still, the systems remained in place for centuries. You crouch by the edge of one of the pools. The air feels cooler here. It's probably the open space, the lack of dense buildings. But there's a trick to it too, microclimates created by clever orientation and thermal mass. The clay around the pools holds coolness long into the night. And when the wind from the badgir starts to flow, especially those near storage domes, the entire system enters a gentle, invisible choreography. You look up and spot a modest wind tower nearby, shorter than others, plain square. It's there to assist the ice, not the people. The warm air inside the dome it's connected to is gently encouraged to leave, and by letting go of its heat, the dome keeps its secret a little longer. There's something poetic about the fact that in a place where the sun rules with such authority, people found a way to preserve cold. Not resist heat, but remember cold. And they did it not with machines or force, but with angles, shadows, and patience. You sit for a while beside the water. The stars multiply above you. A stray breeze rolls across the fields, and you notice that even the layout of the city feels designed to respect airflow. From the towers to the walls, from the ice pools to the domes, everything flows. And in that flow they found comfort. Not excess, not waste. Just enough coolness to sleep through the night. Enough ice to serve guests with dignity. Enough wind to keep food and families content. You dip your hand into the pool. It's warmer than it would be in winter, of course. But the idea still lingers. That when the time is right, when the season allows, this field becomes a factory of ice, powered by the moon, the sky and the wind. Your host hands you another glass mint syrup diluted with cold water, stirred slowly with a silver spoon. You drink. And somewhere behind you the wind tower exhales once again. The night in Yazd doesn't fall, it arrives gently. By the time you return from the ice pools, the city has draped itself in velvet. The alleyways are darker now, but not silent. You can hear voices, quiet ones. Someone's playing a sitar in the distance, the sound delicate as a whisper. The wind glides softly through the city's arteries, and the badgers rise like candles that have never burned but somehow still glow. You find yourself back inside a different home now, this one belonging to a family of craftsmen. Your host waves you through the door, where a carved archway frames a lush enclosed garden. It's a small hayat, a private courtyard ringed with orange trees and a single round pool at the centre. You sit on the cool stone bench again this time, not surprised by the relief. It's expected now, trusted. The air here doesn't just move, it knows where it's going. Every part of the house has been built to accommodate it, to channel it, to respect it. And the centrepiece once again, the wind tower above. You ask your host how long it took to build. He laughs softly. The tower. Not long, but knowing where to build it that takes generations. That's the truth behind it. Badgirs were never mass-produced. Each was crafted with a unique relationship to its building, its location, its family. The angle of the streets, the position of nearby trees, the slope of the roof, all of these informed its design. It was personalised climate control before personalisation became a tech company slogan. You wander through the inner rooms. There's a space for sleeping mats laid directly in the path of the airflow. Another for cooking with a tiny skylight that lets hot air rise, while the badgir pulls fresh air through a corridor. A niche beside the entry holds a clay amphora filled with Goli Mohammadi dried damask roses, scented air wafting through the structure every time the breeze shifts. And then you notice something new, a second badgir on the opposite side of the house. It's smaller, a bit older looking, but placed strategically. Your host sees your curiosity and explains it's for balance. Some homes used multiple towers, not just for more air, but for control. On hot, still days, one tower would draw air in while the other helped vent it out. On windy nights, both might open to funnel a cross breeze through the entire home. It wasn't just about catching the wind, it was about composing it like music. Historians still examine old house layouts to trace this kind of design logic. Some believe double tower systems were reserved for the elite. Others point to rural homes with humble twin vents carved into opposing walls. The principles were scalable. The elegance was universal. You ask what happens when there's no wind at all. Your host shrugs, then we wait, even the desert sleeps. But the truth is there's always some movement of air. And these towers are so sensitive, so attuned to the microcurrents of their environment, that even a faint temperature difference can be enough. Warm air inside, cool air outside, that alone can create flow. You return to the courtyard and lie on your back beside the pool. The sky above is so clear it almost feels artificial. The stars stretch endlessly. The outline of the wind tower cuts a perfect rectangle into the darkness, and that's when you hear it the softest flutter. Not of fabric, not of birds, of air curling down the tower shaft, skimming the pool, brushing the stones, and slipping past your skin like a ghost that just wanted to say hello. Another glass appears beside you, this time infused with hibiscus and a hint of saffron. Chilled, of course. You don't even question it anymore. This house has lived many lives. It has cooled many hands. It has whispered sleep into many ears. And tonight, it does the same for you. As you drift somewhere between waking and sleep, the last thought that stirs in your mind is this. We've spent the last 100 years trying to invent comfort. But maybe the Persians already did. In clay, in shade, in wind. And they did it so gently you almost didn't notice. The next morning begins not with an alarm, but with light filtered through reed shades and the soft rustle of morning air sliding down the wind tower. You stretch still half draped in sleep and sit upright on your mat, the stone floor beneath your feet cool and dry. The city beyond the walls is stirring slowly, bread ovens, lighting water being drawn from deep wells, and the faint clip of sandals on cobbled paths. Breakfast is simple flatbread baked with sesame fresh cucumber slices and goat cheese that's been kept cool in a clay container nestled in the shadow of a windshaft. Beside it, a small pitcher of cold water flavoured with rose petals and mint. You pour a glass and the first sip reminds you this is not modern refrigeration. It's not ice cold. It's just right cool enough to comfort, not so cold it startles. It tastes like a place that knows how to wait for the breeze. Later, you're invited to visit the Friday Mosque of Yazd, one of the oldest surviving structures in the region that incorporates wind towers into its architecture. As you step into the mosque's outer courtyard, the air is hot, dry and serious as the desert prefers. But the moment you pass through the arched entrance, the temperature shifts. Again, high above you within the ornate geometric patterns and turquoise tilework, badgers have been woven discreetly into the walls. You wouldn't notice them unless you knew where to look. They don't distract from the beauty they serve it. The design is functional and reverent. Cool air moves through the mosque like a slow breath between prayers. You walk along shaded colonnades, and even in the largest prayer hall where the vaulted ceilings echo every footstep, the air is not stagnant. There's no fan, no draft. Just a soft, barely perceptible flow across the skin guided by towers built generations ago to align with both nature and devotion. Your guide, an elderly man in flowing white linen, explains in a hushed tone that the architects of the mosque understood more than bricks and wind, they understood people. A congregation distracted by discomfort can't focus on prayer, so they built silence, stillness, shade, and air. Historians still marvel at how seamlessly form and function blended in Persian religious architecture. Some even argue that badgers were sacred in their own way, symbols of balance between heaven and earth. There's a theory that they were aligned with spiritual geometry, placed not just where the wind was best, but where the soul could breathe most deeply. You don't know if that's true, but as you sit near a carved pillar and sip from the small tin cup offered to you cold water, drawn from Erkanat running beneath the mosque, you start to understand why some prayers don't need words. Later that day, as the sun climbs higher, you're shown a classroom, once a madrasa, where children studied math, astronomy and poetry under the care of the wind tower above. A wooden desk remains in the corner, and on it, carved into the surface by a long-forgotten student's idle hand, is a spiral. Just a simple spiral, but it mimics the flow of wind through the tower. The breeze that brushes your cheek in that moment might be the same one that kissed that boy's neck centuries ago, as he scratched verses into his notebook. The room holds no air conditioning, and yet you could fall asleep there in minutes. As you leave the mosque complex, the shadows have lengthened. The air outside is heavier, noisier, but you walk slower now, more aware of how it moves. You stop in an alley and raise your face slightly toward a tower you hadn't noticed before. It's not tall, not proud, but it's working. A whisper of air escapes from a narrow slit at its base, brushing against the wall curling round your ankles. Not all wind towers are grand, some are just there, doing what they were built to do. And perhaps that's the most powerful lesson of all. That comfort doesn't have to announce itself. That brilliance can be silent. That coolness, real coolness, is not the sensation of artificial blast, but of gentle consistency, thoughtfulness, patience, and above all of listening to what the wind wants. The late afternoon draws long shadows across the baked earth as you wander into one of Yazd's more modest neighbourhoods, less visited, less photographed, but just as alive with the rhythms of the wind. Your guide brings you to a crumbling corner where a badger leans slightly, not dangerously, but just enough to look deliberate. This one, he says, leans for a reason. It's true. Not all wind towers stand perfectly upright. Some are tilted, subtly angled toward prevailing wind directions. At first glance, it might look like an architectural error, the result of time or settlement. But in many cases, this tilt is intentional. It's strategic. You walk around the tower's base, running your hand along the sun-warmed brick. On the side, facing the direction of Yazd's strongest seasonal winds, the openings are wider. The opposite side is narrower, sometimes even closed. This asymmetry helps focus and accelerate the airflow. A lean of just a few degrees allows for better capture of directional wind, especially in areas where natural breezes are inconsistent. Historians still discuss whether this was calculated in the way we now understand engineering. Some believe the builders followed long-held traditions, mapping the winds over seasons using smoke thread or flags. Others think it was a mixture of observation and art trial and correction passed down through generations. What's certain is that the result was functional. These towers worked. And it's not just the lean, it's the internal structure too. Some towers are hollow from top to bottom, while others are partitioned inside by angled panels of wood or mud brick. These partitions, like slanted baffles, redirect airflow down into the rooms more efficiently and prevent turbulence. You step into a side room where the breeze coming through a slanted channel hits your face, not with force but with poise, angled just so it brushes your shoulder before slipping along the floor. You sit cross-legged on a carpet directly beneath the path of one of these directed vents and listen. There's something musical about it. Not a song exactly, but a rhythm, a pulse. It rises and falls depending on the strength of the outdoor wind, as if the tower is tuning itself moment by moment. And all of this, every slanted vent, every slight lean, was done without electricity. No calibration tools, just the wisdom of hands that knew how to listen to air. Your host joins you with a tray of saffron tea and sesame sweets. He tells a story, half legend, half memory, about an old architect who could tell which direction to build a tower by how dust swirled when dropped from a handful. He would wait crouching until it settled in a spiral. Then he would begin to draw in the sand. You ask if he believes it. He smiles. Doesn't matter. The tower's still standing, isn't it? You laugh, but the message lingers. The science behind wind towers is real, documented, diagrammed, proven. But the practice, that's something else. It's part intuition, part devotion. These towers weren't just venting systems. They were extensions of the earth itself, shaped to match the personality of each house, the mood of each season, the needs of each family. You finish your tea and step back outside. The leaning badger casts a long shadow, now pointing directly toward the low horizon, where the sun is preparing its final descent. The angle of the tower almost seems to mimic that slant, as if bowing in greeting to the wind that's just beginning to stir again. And maybe it is. You reach out one last time, place your palm against the bricks and feel it, the breeze subtle and firm, rushing past with ancient purpose. Not straight, not aggressive, but perfect. Evening has taken hold now. The sky has settled into a deep indigo pierced with stars so steady they feel stitched in place. The city begins to quiet, but the towers keep working. Tonight you're invited to a small neighbourhood gathering a few families seated in a shared courtyard surrounded by homes linked like quiet siblings. It's not a celebration exactly, just a rhythm. A nightly moment of shared food, shared stories and shared air. You find your seat beside a low table spread with warm flatbread bowls of yoghurt and cucumber-roasted eggplant, and of course a pitcher of sharbadi ablamou, a tart lemon drink cooled with the help of a simple clay pot placed beneath one of the wind towers earlier in the day. No ice, no refrigeration, just patience. The courtyard itself feels alive. The air moves across your shoulders, brushes the back of your neck, and slips beneath the table like a playful cat. You're in the direct path of a well-tuned tower, one that's not overly tall, not overly proud, but positioned with such care that its cooling effect reaches everyone here, even those sitting by the far wall. Someone lights a small lantern and its flame leans ever so slightly in the direction of the airflow. You all notice. You all smile. Even the fire is subject to the tower's breath. You glance upward again. These towers silhouetted against starlight aren't just features, they're participants. You've begun to understand them not as objects, but as quiet workers, as guardians. They're not decorations from the past, they're lessons from it. One of the elders begins to speak a story half remembered about a man who once built a house so attuned to the wind that it cooled his food, rocked his child to sleep, and even stirred his tea. The others chuckle gently. You're not sure if it's folklore or memory, and it doesn't matter. Because somewhere between the laughter and the wind, it feels true. The conversation shifts to the weather. A younger man mentions how summer heat feels worse these days, how new building cement block towers without wind towers trap heat rather than release it. Everyone nods, some with regret, some with quiet defiance. You're told that newer neighbourhoods often forget the lessons. Badgirs are seen as old-fashioned, too much maintenance, too slow, and yet those who live beneath them sleep better, store better, breathe better. Historians still argue whether modern adaptation solar panels, electric fans, insulation foams can replicate what these towers do. But the truth is, no technology has yet fully replaced the magic of natural flow. It's not just the cooling, it's the feeling, the connection to rhythm, the reminder that your house is not a sealed box but a living partner in your survival. You're shown a sketchbook by a student architect. Inside are pages of Badgear experiments, new shapes, restored towers, hybrid systems that blend solar chimneys and ancient principles. There's hope, it seems. Not just nostalgia, but innovation. Even wind needs updating, sometimes someone jokes. But the principles remain the same. Let hot air rise, let cool air flow, and let your building breathe with you. After dinner you all recline on floor cushions. The lanterns flicker. The stars tilt slightly as the earth turns. A baby sleeps peacefully in her mother's arms, her tiny curls stirred by the same breeze that's brushed 1,000 generations before her. And as the night deepens, the air doesn't stop. It continues quietly, endlessly, down through the towers, across the courtyards, through windows and over skin. It doesn't need a switch. It doesn't need to be thanked. It simply is. The next day, you find yourself wandering alone through the quieter corners of the city, places where the tourists don't go, where the wind towers are not tall or ornate, but weathered, patched, and stubbornly useful. One catches your eye. It's not even connected to a grand home. It's affixed to a tiny caravanserai, now mostly used for storage. The tower is short, squat, and partially crumbling, but still somehow working. A breeze flutters out through a wall vent below, carrying the faint scent of wool dust and cumin. You step inside. The interior is dark and cool, the air thick with history. Once this space would have been filled with travellers, merchants, pilgrims, wanderers, who arrived with tired animals and hotter tempers. And even back then, long before the world was wired, they could count on a wind tower to offer relief. Caravanserais were crucial nodes in Persia's trading routes, and many were designed with passive cooling in mind. The walls were thick, the floors often sunken, and the courtyards open to maximise airflow. But the real game-changer, the Badgirs installed above the guest rooms, ensuring that even a weary traveller, sweaty and sunburnt, could sleep under the breath of moving air. You sit for a moment on a worn stone bench, the same kind that must have hosted 100 languages and 1,000 tales. You imagine a merchant from Samarkand fanning himself with a scroll, a camel driver wetting his scarf at the fountain, a child pressing her cheek to the wall to feel the coolness. These weren't homes, they weren't sacred spaces, but the principle held firm: every building, even a temporary one, should serve comfort. The wind was always part of the plan. Historians still discuss the architecture of these roadside inns, whether the Badgirs were added later or always part of the blueprint. Some suggest they were luxury features for wealthier routes. Others argue they were a standard of desert hospitality, a reminder that no matter how far from home you wandered, you deserved cool air, clean water, and silence. Outside, a stray breeze stirs. It slips past your shoulder and into the old caravanserai behind you. It doesn't need a door. It finds its way like water through stone. You move on deeper into the back streets where schoolchildren giggle past in a blur of notebooks and dusty sandals. You notice how every building, no matter how small, has some feature for airflow. Vents carved into upper walls, rooftop slits positioned just so. The wind is everywhere, and it is welcomed everywhere. You stop by a shop, half spice merchant, half tea house. The smell is incredible: cardamom, sumac, sun-dried mint. Inside, the shopkeeper has positioned his shelves to follow the airflow from a rooftop vent. He doesn't need a fan. The Badgear overhead brings air in, and the vent in the back lets it out. You watch a ribbon hanging in the doorway flutter continuously. Proof. Constant gentle motion. He pours you a cup of hot tea with crushed basil and clove, then gestures to a seat near the airflow. Best spot, he says with a grin. Always has been. You sip. The tea is scalding, but the breeze across your brow balances it. Hot drink, cool air, shaded corner, it's perfect. And you realise this isn't just architecture, it's lifestyle, it's choreography, a cultural rhythm that doesn't demand or force but flows. It teaches you something too. Not everything has to be optimised for maximum power. Not every problem needs brute force solving. Sometimes it's enough to angle the vent a little to the left, to open a window, to build with the sun instead of against it, to listen for the wind and trust that it will find its way to you. You lean back, close your eyes, and let the air do what it's always done. It moves. By now you recognise the sound before you feel it. The subtle hush of air being drawn down through the ribs of a tower, folding softly against mud brick and stone, whispering around corners, like it knows the way better than you do. You're back at your lodging, one of the restored homes, tucked just inside the old city's maze, and you decide to spend the evening where the story began, beneath the tallest badger on the property. Only this time you're not exploring, you're just being. The tower looms above you, outlined by the low glow of lanterns strung along the rooftop. The night air is light cooler now than it's been in days, and the tower's breath seems slower, as if the structure itself is preparing to sleep. You lie back on a mat, arms folded behind your head, and listen. This is where it all comes together. You begin to notice the rhythm of the city's collective towers. Some are pulling air downward, others are venting heat out. Some stand idle, quiet, at rest, their job already done. But all of them, every single one, is still in relationship with the world around them. There's no noise, no artificial buzz, just the ancient physics of pressure and patience. Your host joins you, hands you a final glass of chilled syrup, the classic rose and sour cherry, with a few crushed basil leaves, and sits beside you in companionable silence. You clink cups, not loudly, and sip. Then he tells you something you won't forget. These towers, he says, they don't just cool the air, they cool the mind. You let the words hang there. Not because they're poetic, though they are, but because they're true. You feel it. This whole experience, this immersion in the quiet genius of natural design has shifted something in you. It's not just about temperature anymore, it's about attitude. In a world rushing to invent smarter homes and faster machines, the bad gear reminds you that maybe the smartest structures don't shout their solutions. Maybe they just listen. Historians still debate whether the decline of wind towers was due to modern convenience or cultural neglect. Some argue it was simply the rise of air conditioning. Others say it was the loss of listening, that buildings stopped responding to the environment when people stopped noticing the wind. You look at your glass. It's sweating lightly in the breeze, and the drink inside stays cold, not from a fridge, but from a relationship. From a design that asked, where does the wind go, and then built its answer in brick and clay. You ask what happens if the wind doesn't come. Your host chuckles, then the house waits. There's no panic, no failure, just adaptation. The walls hold coolness, the earth offers stillness, and eventually the breeze returns. It always does. And when it does, the tower is ready, open, listening, poised to welcome it like an old friend. You lie there for a while longer, and the city begins to exhale with you. A pigeon rustles above, a lantern flickers, and the wind, yes, still slides past your cheek and disappears into the night. And in that moment, beneath a structure built 1,000 years ago to catch the breath of the earth itself, you understand something rare. We didn't always try to conquer nature, once we danced with it, and somewhere in this warm desert night the music still plays. You wake the next morning with a kind of clarity, the kind that only comes from deep sleep in a cool room designed for silence. There's no hum of appliances, no dry sting of recycled air, just the soft rustle of linen, the gentle creak of sunlight filtering through slatted shutters, and the familiar sigh of the wind tower doing its morning work. It's become a companion now, this constant hush. You no longer notice it as a sound. It's more like a background presence, like a loyal dog at your feet, or the shade of an old tree that's always been there. Today you're shown something a little different. A bathhouse. Not one in use, but preserved, a relic of another rhythm, another ritual. The domed roof is low, pierced with small coloured glass apertures that scatter daylight in soft dappled circles across the tile floor. It's quiet, abandoned, but strangely warm with memory. You step inside and feel the temperature change again. But here it's not cooler yet. Instead, you're shown the vents along the roof, and high walls, ducts connected once again to a wind tower. These weren't used just for cooling. They were also used to vent steam, regulate humidity, and dry the space after each use. Even in the bathhouse, the bad gear was working. You imagine it now, men wrapped in towels, laughing, scrubbing, sipping tea, the scent of eucalyptus rising from hot stones. and above them the tower pulling out excess heat, ensuring that when the bathing ended and the rest began, the room would be calm, balanced. Historians still discuss how deliberately these systems were integrated. Were the towers meant primarily for comfort or for hygiene? Some say they were repurposed, built first to cool homes, then adapted to serve public spaces. Others argue their use in hammams was among the earliest. What's clear is that wherever people gathered home, mosque, market, bathhouse, the tower followed. Later, your guide shows you a wind diagram, an old map etched into a ceramic panel showing not the streets of Yazd but its air currents. Each badger is a node in a larger system. Some face north, others west, a few south, catching rare seasonal winds and channeling them towards storage rooms, cooking areas or sleeping quarters. It wasn't random, it was responsive. You leave the bathhouse and pass through a quiet lane. There's a smaller building here, long and low, with narrow vents near the roofline and a tiny tower barely taller than your shoulders. It's a mausoleum, a family tomb. The air inside is fresh, not musty. Dry, not decayed. The tower above, you're told, was used not for the living, but for the dead. Even in death air mattered. There's something deeply human about that. To build a system not only for comfort, but for care. For honouring stillness with breath. For making sure that rest, be it night sleep or final sleep, is accompanied by wind. You sit on a stone ledge nearby and the wind changes again. Just slightly. The morning breeze giving way to midday warmth. The tower above you groans once softly and adjusts. A new current begins. You feel it move around you like an old friend stretching before another day of work. And you realise this isn't just environmental design. It's emotional design. It teaches you to move with the world, not against it. To shape space so that the air has its say. To understand that when something invisible is welcomed, it stays. And it serves. Your host brings you a final treat. A dish of soft dates chilled slightly beneath the tower's path. No fan touched them. No freezer hummed. Just the night's memory of cool air stored in clay and kindness. You bite into one. Sweet, cold, perfect. And the breeze continues. You wander once more through Yazd, this time without a guide. You no longer need one. Your feet follow the shaded paths instinctively. You know now to keep to the narrower alleys where the breeze is pinched and playful, where it accelerates as it snakes between sun-baked walls. Your eyes catch details. Others might miss small vents near the base of towers, slits in the corners of courtyards, a single brick angled slightly different from the rest to coax the wind's attention. You've begun to read the city. You pause near a row of older homes, some inhabited, some abandoned. One of the houses has a partially collapsed wind tower. Its brick skeleton leans slightly forward, ribs exposed to the sun, the once elegant latticework now broken. And yet even in this state it hums. A breeze still passes through the broken openings. You feel it brush against your face. The structure, though wounded, still serves its purpose, still listens, still cools. You step inside carefully. Dust floats in the still air, stirred only by the faint flow from above. A cracked basin sits dry in the centre of the courtyard, and vines have begun to reclaim the walls. But the air in here, it's cooler than outside. Even broken, the Badger is working. You sit on a fallen beam and think of all the places you've seen, now homes, baths, tombs, kitchens, caravanserais, all shaped by air. And all of them taught you the same lesson. The difference between comfort and discomfort is not about control. It's about cooperation. Historians still explore what happened when this relationship was forgotten. When cement replaced clay. When glass towers ignored the sun. When buildings were built as statements, not as partners. The wind, they say, still comes, but it finds fewer places to go. And so it becomes heat, pressure, stagnation. But here in this silent house it still moves. Not because someone told it to, but because someone long ago asked it to. Your hand rests on a mud brick wall, the texture coarse, the surface warm. Beneath it, generations of builders mixed earth and water with straw and memory. They didn't have engineering degrees. They had experience. They had failure. They had the willingness to try again, to shift a vent 3 degrees, to carve a slit just a bit wider. And over centuries, those choices became systems, not machines, habits. You rise and walk slowly back out into the alley. A small boy watches you from behind a cracked doorframe holding a plastic toy car. You smile. He doesn't. But he glances up at the Badger above his house, then back at you. And somehow, you know he understands. You walk on passing walls marked with centuries of hands. Some carry paint, some fingerprints. One carries the outline of a former tower, now sealed off like a scar. The home must have modernised air conditioners, installed the old vent closed. And yet, A small crack near the roofline still breathes. Just a little, as if the house refuses to forget. You round a corner and spot a wind tower in full restoration scaffolding. Rising up its sides, workers carefully applying new plaster over old bricks. It's not being replaced, it's being revived. And that somehow feels more hopeful than anything. You pause one last time beneath the tower. The workers step aside as a breeze gusts downwards, stirring their shirts, their tools the tarp tied to the scaffolding. Everyone smiles reflexively. The foreman points upward and says something that makes the crew laugh. You don't catch it all, but you hear the word nafas, breath. Because yes, that's what this has been all along. The house has breathed. The city breathes. The past breathes. And thanks to these towers, thanks to the quiet precision of clay and intention, you've been breathing differently too. That evening, you're invited to one of the oldest homes still privately lived in a family estate passed down through generations, lovingly maintained and more importantly lived in. There's no velvet rope, no display plaque, just cousins shouting from balconies, a grandmother making flatbread in the courtyard oven, and children running barefoot across smooth, cool stone. You're ushered into a summer room, a chamber designed specifically for the hottest season, positioned beneath one of the most elegantly tuned wind towers you've encountered yet. It's not the tallest, not the widest, but it's perfect. You feel it the moment you enter. The air inside is not just cooler than outside, it's calmer. Still moving, but without force, like it's decided this is the room it wants to stay in. This room is called the Tabastan Neshin, literally the summer sitter. You settle into a cushion placed against a wall so thick you suspect time itself is stored in there. The breeze flows in through a narrow vent near the ceiling, glides along the curved plaster wall and settles over the floor like a mist made of memory. Your host appears with another tray dried mulberries, iced grape syrup, and a teapot gently sweating through a damp cloth. You lift your cup and the steam from the tea lifts up and outward, drawn subtly toward the vent that sits just above shoulder height. The tower above is doing its job, not just bringing air in, but taking heat away. Tea and breeze dancing together. The host explains that every season has a room. Winter rooms, smaller and built with fewer vents, retain warmth. Spring rooms have wide windows and high ceilings, but the summer room, this one, it is the soul of the house. You learn that the tower here isn't fixed, it's adaptive. There's a system of shutters, ropes and levers that can open or close certain vents depending on wind direction. It's manual, yes, but it's brilliant. One son climbs a narrow interior ladder and pulls a rope. The tone of the air changes instantly. The flow redirects. A sleeping cat in the corner lifts its head, eyes the ceiling and falls back asleep. Historians still debate whether these rope-controlled systems were widespread or unique to wealthier homes. Some say they were common in Yazd. Others argue they were rare, labour-intensive luxuries. But as with everything else you've seen, the truth isn't in the blueprints, it's in the behaviour, in how the family uses the space. You're told that as a child the host used to race his brother to be the one to climb the tower and open the vents in the morning. Not because it was a chore, but because it meant controlling the sky, directing the wind. He mimics the feeling now, climbing barefoot, tugging the worn rope, listening for the moment the house sighs in reply. You finish your tea, the cup is warm, your hands are not. The air gliding across the room takes care of that. You sit back and look up. The vent above you frames a slice of night sky already dusted with stars. You realise the house is watching it too, tracking the night air, opening itself toward it, letting it in. You're struck by a simple, quiet truth. The house is not just a shelter. It is a tool, a finely tuned one. And unlike modern machines that hiss and hum and force their power, this one asks politely, waits for the breeze and welcomes it when it comes. You run your fingers along the wall. The plaster is cool, not cold, just ready. It reminds you of water held in a jug, still but refreshing when poured. The cat stretches and shifts to a new corner, one the air now favours. You smile jealous of its intuition. And the tower above hums softly a lullaby of clay and wind. You step outside just before midnight, the house gently asleep behind you. The wind tower still exhales into the dark like a resting creature, its work never finished but never rushed. The night air smells faintly of dry grass, plaster and jasmine. Someone nearby must be tending a garden that only opens after sunset. You follow a narrow path between homes, guided not by sight but by feel. You can tell where towers stand by the texture of the air, thinner here, cooler there, lifting your sleeves slightly before disappearing again. It's strange how the city has taught you this second language, this new way of reading invisible motion. Then without meaning to, you stumble upon one of the abandoned districts, a quarter of the old city where time has pulled a curtain, but left the stage untouched. The walls lean, doors hang open, but the towers, many still stand. And the wind still moves. You step into one roofless home and stand quietly. It feels sacred in a way that has nothing to do with religion. No roof, no furniture, barely any walls, and yet the interior space still cools you. The tower above cracked, faded chipped drawers the warm air up and away even now. Even in disrepair it does what it was made to do. You realise this is the ultimate test of good design when the builder is long gone, when the users are dust, when the paint has peeled and the voices have faded and still it works. Historians sometimes call wind towers vernacular architecture, meaning built from local material responding to local climate guided by local tradition. But what they sometimes forget to emphasise is how generous that makes them. These weren't monuments. They weren't created for glory or vanity. They were gifts. Clay, air, water, shadow. A few bricks stacked in just the right way to make a space livable, a night bearable, a sleep restful. And those gifts endure. You sit on a low threshold, your back against a wall older than most countries. The tower above creaks softly, wooden slats shifting slightly in the night air. And you imagine what this place was like 100 years ago. Or 500. Laughter in the courtyard. A basin full of rainwater. Bread baking. A mother humming as she lays her child beneath the soft breath of the Badgear. You don't need a time machine. The wind is one. It carries the same stories. It touches the same surfaces. It curls around your body just as it did theirs. And in that thought there's comfort. Immense comfort. You lean back and close your eyes. You don't hear machines. You don't hear traffic. You hear the wind, and in it you hear design, memory, humanity. The Badgear doesn't know who you are. It doesn't care if you speak the language or understand the city. It calls you anyway. Silently. Gently. And when you open your eyes again, it's still there, slanted slightly cracked at the edge, glowing faintly in the starlight. Still serving, still breathing, still waiting for someone to notice just how quietly it cares. The next morning you wake earlier than usual. There's no alarm, just the faint shift in light on the wall, and the whisper of cooler air brushing your face. It's sunrise, and the wind tower's already working, already pulling in the gentlest drafts from the fading night. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and climb to the roof for one last view before the heat returns. From this quiet height the city stretches before you, in earthy tones, rooftops rippling like waves, domes resting like sleeping tortoises, and the familiar vertical lines of Badgears catching the first orange glint of morning. This time you notice something you hadn't seen before. Every tower is different. Some are octagonal, others square. Some have 4 open sides, others 6, some 8. A few have intricate brickwork patterns, almost floral, while others are plain and utilitarian. Their diversity is surprising, but more than that, it's personal. Each Badgear reflects the house it serves, the family that built it, the wind it was meant to chase. You sit beside the edge legs dangling slightly over the lip of the parapet and sip a warm drink brought up by your host's daughter, a quiet girl who doesn't say much but whose eyes track the wind. She places the cup gently beside you and nods at the tower above. Zarafe, she says, a name. You blink. The wind tower has a name. Yes, she explains softly, all of them used to. Not formal names, not written ones, but nicknames, passed down in families. Towers were treated as parts of the household, almost like wise, quiet aunts, who never spoke but always knew exactly what to do. Some were called things like Shabgir, Night Catcher. Others were Delnafasan, Heart Breather, names born from how the towers behaved, how they felt. Historians rarely write that down, but the people remember. You let that sink in. In the West, a building is a tool, a structure, an object. But here, at least in this city, some buildings were once companions. You glance up at Zarafe. She's not a masterpiece. Her plaster is chipped. A few bricks are slightly mismatched from past repairs, but her shape is graceful, her proportions thoughtful, her position proud. She doesn't boast, but she knows, and she has earned that name, and so have others. Your host joins you, pointing toward the horizon. That one there, Golbadan. Rose body. We always said she made the summer smell better. You laugh. It sounds silly. Then you remember the way one tower funneled the scent of rosewater and jasmine through the kitchen garden, and suddenly it isn't silly at all. This isn't nostalgia, this is relationship. And like all relationships, it requires maintenance, trust, observation. You ask if they still name towers now. Your host shrugs. Not often, but maybe we should again. Maybe we all should. Because when you name something, you care for it differently. You notice its moods. You respect its work. You listen for its voice, even if that voice is only the soft hush of moving air on a too hot day. You finish your drink and run your hand along the rooftop wall. The sun has just begun to heat it. The air will warm soon, but you're not worried. You know now how the house will respond. You know how Zarafe will rise to the challenge, not loudly, not dramatically, but faithfully. The girl gathers the tray and walks off without a word, and the breeze returns. It's time to go soon. But you realise something profound as you rise to your feet and brush the dust from your robe. You came here to escape the heat, but what you found was a city that made peace with it. And that peace is something you'll carry, like a breath. Your final day in Yazd begins not with urgency, but with a kind of reverence. You've walked the streets, sat under towers, drunk water cooled by nothing but cleverness and time. And now, with your bags packed and your heart still full, you do what any traveller does before leaving a place that changed them. You visit the bazaar. It's not just for spices or souvenirs, it's for air. You step through the arched entrance of the Bazar-e Khan, one of the oldest covered markets in the city. The moment you enter, the air changes. It's cooler, shaded, alive. Above your head, hidden in the high-vaulted ceilings, are badgirs. Some are visible open slits in the domes that rise like ancient seashells. Others are tucked behind latticework and stone grills. But they're there. You feel them. This was perhaps the most underappreciated gift of Persian architecture markets, cooled by natural ventilation. Designed not just for function, but for flow. The alleys curve slightly to follow prevailing breezes. The ceilings rise to create space for air to swirl and settle. The walls breathe gently, absorbing and releasing heat like seasoned lungs. You move slowly past cloth vendors, jewellers, tea sellers and coppersmiths, each stall kissed by the same breeze that drifted through 1,000 footsteps before yours. You pause beside a vendor selling dried herbs and oils. His shelves are full of bundles basil thyme lavender rue. He offers you a small packet wrapped in linen. For your next house, he says with a wink. Tuck it near the airflow. You laugh and take it, and then you notice something behind his stall, a staircase narrow and worn leading up. He nods. You want to see the heart. Of course you do. You climb carefully, your hand brushing against the cool stone rail. At the top you step into a chamber just beneath the main badger of the bazaar. It's vast, hollow, and somehow more sacred than any place you've been yet. The air here is in constant motion, not wild, not forceful, but steady. It glides down from high slatted windows, passes over the shop roofs and continues into the spaces where people linger longest. This chamber is not for show. It's a calibration point, a pressure-balancing, scent-diffusing, heat-negotiating room. And it's almost always empty, because no one needs to be here. It simply functions. Historians still argue whether Persian architects understood thermodynamics as we do today. But the design of this space makes one thing clear: they didn't need formulas. They had observation, iteration. They watched the dust and smelled the heat, and listened to the silence, and then they built this. You stand still, close your eyes, breathe in. Air passes through your fingers, a note of coriander, a wisp of wool, a hint of cumin, all moving, all mixing, all carried by the breath of 1,000-year-old design. When you descend again, the market seems even quieter, like the tower left part of its hush inside you. You walk slowly now, fingers brushing the textiles, the copper bowls, the door frames. Everything feels more intentional, because everything is. You step back into the sunlight. It's sharp, the heat is immediate, but you smile, because now you understand how to read it, how to move with it, how to make peace. As you head toward the edge of the city, toward the waiting taxi, you pass one final badger, tall, elegant, wrapped in scaffolding. A worker in dusty overalls is perched on a wooden plank halfway up, smoothing fresh plaster over old clay. You wave, he waves back, and without saying anything, you both understand. He's not fixing a tower. He's helping a house remember how to breathe. The road out of Yazd is long and open, flanked by low hills, and the kind of vast shimmering desert that makes even silence seem loud. You ride in a quiet car, the window cracked just slightly to let the wind slip in. It's hotter out here, away from the city's careful designs and thoughtful architecture, where the land rules without contest. But even now you feel different. Not just physically, mentally. Your body responds to the heat more gently, almost as if it's learned to trust it. You pass a village whose name you don't catch. It's barely more than a dozen homes scattered across a slope, all in the same sun-washed adobe hue. And there unmistakably is another badger, modest, perhaps no more than 3 meters tall, but unmistakable in form. Even here wind is welcomed. You wonder about the person who built it. Not a professional architect, surely. just someone with mud water time and knowledge, passed down through gestures, stories, and practical mistakes. Someone who stood in that courtyard, squinted up at the sky, and decided where the breeze would arrive, then built for it. That's the part they never write in textbooks: humility. The people who built these towers didn't think they were making miracles. They weren't chasing elegance or awards. They were listening, adjusting, honouring the wind's path, not dictating it. And that more than anything else is what makes the towers work. You think about your own home, wherever it may be, with walls that don't breathe, windows that never quite open right, and vents that hiss like tired machines. Could it be different? Could it learn from this? Maybe not with mud, brick and lime, but maybe with intention. Maybe with questions like, where does the sun go? Where does the air want to move? How can I shape space to listen better? The road stretches onward. A new town appears on the horizon, more modern, more angular. Satellite dishes bloom from concrete rooftops. Glass windows shimmer in the sun. You count the bad gears. None. Not here. And yet you wonder, could they come back? There are architects now, young thoughtful ones, who study Yazd's towers not as relics, but as blueprints for the future. They map airflow, they model thermal mass, they sketch hybrid designs, solar-powered fans that activate only when the air stops moving, ceramic filters that humidify desert wind using nothing but geometry. Innovation that starts by looking backward. Historians still argue whether these revivals are sustainable or symbolic. Some say the future lies in new materials, not old shapes. But others believe the essence of the Badgir, the trust in earth, in air, in slow design, can and should shape the next generation of cities. And why not? Why shouldn't a tower rise again? Not from nostalgia, but from wisdom, from reverence, from the quiet belief that maybe the smartest buildings are not the ones that say, look at me, but the ones that say, breathe with me. You rest your head against the window. The sun glances off the glass, but your body remains calm. The desert hums around you, and somewhere behind you 1,000 towers keep working. For strangers, for families, for ghosts, for the wind. The city has faded in the distance now, but its breath lingers with you. You find yourself in a roadside rest area, little more than a shaded awning and a squat building with tea dates and dusty plastic chairs. The kind of place where time drips slowly and the heat speaks louder than the people. You sit beneath the awning. It's not especially comfortable. The sun pushes hard against the canvas above. The walls are thin and reflective. There's no airflow, no current. The air is still. And in that stillness you finally understand what the Bagger saved you from. This pause in motion, this unmoving pressing weight is what most of the world accepts as normal in the heat. You shift in your seat. You sip lukewarm water from a sweating bottle. You miss the breeze. You look around. The building here is modern concrete steel beams, glass windows sealed shut. No curves, no thickness. Just flat slabs and vents that haven't worked in years. But the land hasn't changed. The wind hasn't changed. It still moves above around behind, just waiting to be invited in. You walk to the edge of the lot and feel it, a faint breeze moving east to west. Cool compared to the stagnant air behind you. You hold your hand out and imagine for a brief second how easy it would be to build a small tower here. Just a vent, a funnel, a hollow shaft of brick angled toward that direction. The solution is so simple, but the world moves too fast now. Modern architecture often ignores the old lessons, not out of ignorance but impatience. The towers don't work instantly. They don't blast. They don't dazzle. They whisper. And whispers are hard to hear in a culture of noise. But maybe, just maybe, some are still listening. You think back to the child who knew the name of her tower, to the boy who climbed to open the vents, to the merchant who knew which jar to place beneath the airflow, to the roofer restoring old mud brick because it was right, not because it was profitable. These weren't builders. They were wind keepers. And perhaps that's what the world needs again, not just architects, but people who understand space as something you collaborate with. People who don't design at the wind, but with it. You turn back toward the rest stop and smile gently. You don't resent it. It's doing its best. But now you know better. You've felt better. And once you've experienced that kind of quiet grace, the kind that doesn't demand, only offers, you don't forget it. You drink the last of your water and tuck the linen-wrapped herb packet from the bazaar into your bag. It still smells faintly of mint and sun. You know where you'll place it when you get home near the window, that sometimes catches a breeze even if the room wasn't built to welcome it, because maybe that's where it starts. Not with towers, not with cities, but with a small daily act of listening. A window opened before the sun hits the glass. A fan turned off when the night air returns. A question asked before a wall is built. What does the wind want? The answer might not always be clear, but it will always be there, waiting to be heard. You're on the final stretch now, leaving the desert behind, headed toward the mountains where the air is thinner and the shadows stretch longer. But your thoughts linger behind somewhere among the alleys of Yazd, under a sky freckled with towers and silence. At a bend in the road, the driver pulls over not because of a problem, but because he knows what you're looking for. "This one's famous," he says, pointing across the dry plain. It takes you a moment to see it. At the edge of a half-buried village, surrounded by the cracked bones of walls long surrendered to wind and weather, stands a solitary wind tower. No house beneath it, no courtyard, just the tower tall, whole, proud. The last thing standing. You get out and walk toward it. The ground is quiet. The earth here is tired, but not defeated. As you draw near, you realise the bad gear is intact. Weathered, yes, but standing straight. Its slats still open, its shaft still hollow, its purpose still possible. You step inside what remains of the structure beneath it. The roof is gone, the walls are crumbling, but the air, it moves. It flows downward gently, as if the tower didn't know its house was gone, as if it had never stopped. You look up through the shaft, your face framed by the circular opening at the top. There's no sound but the wind, and even that feels like memory. This is what remains when architecture becomes principle, when form is so perfectly married to environment that it outlives everything around it. This tower doesn't need a family to cool. It doesn't need a room to ventilate. It exists for air. You reach up and rest your palm against the inner wall. It's cool to the touch despite the sun. Perfect circle of shade lives just beneath your hand. You imagine how many generations passed through this space never thinking twice about the air brushing their face. How normal it must have felt to live in such harmony, and you wonder what would happen if we rebuilt from this. Not the tower itself, but the spirit of it. Instead of racing to overpower nature, we could return to designing with respect. Buildings that don't impose, homes that don't strain, spaces that breathe with the people inside them, places that give back more than they take. Maybe that's why this tower remains. Not because someone preserved it, but because it knew how to last. You walk back toward the road, the tower slowly receding behind you like a shadow of wisdom. In your bag, the wind-pressed herbs shift gently. You catch the scent of dried mint again, just as a breeze rushes past your shoulder. You turn, the wind moves on. But you don't feel like you're leaving something behind. You feel like you're carrying it. The principle, the memory, the breath. It's still doing its job. You stand there motionless in the broken shell of a once-living place, and the wind wraps around you like memory. There's no room here, no floor mat, no cup of tea, just air sliding down brick that remembers a time when a family laughed here. When the tower exhaled over conversations, over soup, over sleep. And it still works. This is the truth that humbles you most. The tower doesn't need recognition. It doesn't need applause. It was built to serve, to soothe. And it will keep doing that, even if no one is left to notice. You sit for a moment on a pile of worn stone and close your eyes. The wind slips past your shoulder, curls behind your neck, and hums softly as it descends the empty shaft. You imagine what it once sounded like through the wooden baffles, how it would change pitch slightly in summer, deepen during sandstorms, disappear in the stillness before dawn. Historians rarely write about that part, about the character of these towers, the way each one had a tone, a timbre, a rhythm. If you lived beneath one long enough, you'd know when the wind would come. You'd hear it before you felt it. You'd say it's shifting, and you'd move your sleeping mat accordingly. You wouldn't fight the air, you'd invite it. You walk slowly around the tower's base, running your fingers along the warm, coarse surface of its bricks. They're imperfect, handmade, weathered, and yet still strong. Like the people who built them, like the lessons they left behind. As you step away, the wind follows you out, brushing against your back in a final, invisible farewell. You pause once more to look up, and the tower stands as it always has, tall, still, quiet. It doesn't know it's the last. It just knows the air is moving, and that's reason enough to stand.